Hey guys, as you know, this is Measure of an Episode. Our continuing mission is to explore what makes a Star Trek episode a good Star Trek episode and not just good TV. Over here is Jonathan.
And over here is Paul.
And today we will be discussing The Savage Curtain, which was Season 3, Episode 22, the antepenultimate episode of the series.
Of the original series.
Of the original series, yes. And in this episode, Kirk, Spock, Abraham Lincoln, and Serac or Serac, depending on who said it, are pitted in battle against four notorious villains from history.
Okay, so this is probably the most ridiculous, regardless of how they word the blurb, just the ridiculous concept from a blurb, probably on Netflix.
Yes.
And I was expecting just all kinds of silliness from this episode, but it totally works. It's amazing. It's like it's a phenomenally well-written episode.
Up until the very, very end, I agree with you.
Yeah, well, we'll get there.
I know.
We'll get there.
Yeah.
A couple of strange things happen, though. So it starts, it's a normal day on the bridge. They're doing a normal, I guess it's a normal mission. They're surveying a planet.
But did you not notice that music at the very beginning when the show cold opened?
Didn't. What was it?
It was just so dramatic. Like, here is the Enterprise over a planet. Like, it wasn't just mood setting. It was like we are entering in the middle of a suspenseful moment. Okay,
so now that you mentioned, you invoked the music, so I have to comment. So
sure.
The more that I watch this, the more I'm noticing that they reuse music. And I've noticed the same cue, I think, in the last 3 episodes that we've watched, which is the sum total of the amount of episodes we've watched for this podcast so far. and I've noticed the same cue. And so the cue meaning piece of music synchronized to a visual. And I think that they must have recorded some sort of library or something like that. I mean, I'm sure there is an answer to this that we could find out that we just don't know. But right. I'm now going to talk about more, as though I do know. But no, I have noticed it. And I think what happens is they have sort of a library of music at this point, because this is season 3. And they just kind of drop in what fits and what kind of works. And so it may not be the composer's fault at this point that they may have overplayed the moment a tad.
Right. I guess that's fair. But I mean, there's so many other episodes that start with just casual. I mean, the episode begins with, like you just said, it's another day on the bridge. But the music is like we are jumped into the middle of an epic battle between the Federation and the Klingons. And we get to the bridge and they're just chilling.
Yeah, maybe it was foreshadowing, though, because, I mean, some pretty epic shit goes down in this episode.
I guess that's fair. Yeah, I will. Right. But I think you're also maybe giving them a little bit too much credit.
Possibly.
The first thing that caught my attention was Kirk calling Dr. McCoy over to discuss or him like barging himself into the conversation that Spock and Kirk were having about the life forms.
Right.
And I was thinking, why is there a medical officer on the bridge right now for scanning a planet? It just seemed like he needed to be there because it was DeForest Kelley and he had to have his airtime.
Right. And he wasn't really in the episode that much. I mean, I guess he was in the beginning, but he wasn't a main player. Right?
No, that's true. I didn't even think about that.
He's just sort of watching the television show from the bridge at a certain point.
Yes. And then...
But you're right. He does just kind of barge in and say... I mean, I think that because they had so much action to deal with to shoot on this episode, they probably needed to get him in and out very quickly.
Right. And then...
And then...
On a seat...
Okay. So then the big thing happens. Abe Lincoln shows up. President Abe Lincoln. He shows up on the viewer screen.
Yeah, not on a shuttle. Not in the transporter.
Just floating in a chair.
Floating in a chair in space.
And they go through the whole thing. Okay, obviously this isn't real. And he's like, "Yeah, I'm totally real. I can beam aboard."
Right.
And so they beam him aboard, and DeForest Kelley, what's his name? Bones, says, I don't deserve to be on this podcast. Bones says he's definitely human. I know all readings say he is a human, yet they know that, Abraham Lincoln died several hundred years ago on a planet many light years away, as somebody said on the episode. I think it was. And so they're like, you have to come down to the planet. And they're like, oh, this is great. And so at this point, I'm like hooked because they handled it. It wasn't too ham-fisted with Why, yes, Mr. President, you yourself were a wonder. They didn't have to go into a best hits of Abraham Lincoln.
No, not at all.
Right. And so I appreciated that. And I was like hooked. I was like, oh, what's the mystery here?
Well, and I liked that everyone who spoke with him had kind of like an amused respect. They weren't treating him as a hostile enemy. They weren't treating him as if it was really the president. They were speaking to him it was like, just in case you are, I'm going to be respectful. But everybody had this like kind of smirk behind their eye.
In case. Well, it was the reverse of when you get starstruck when a celebrity walks in. If Harrison Ford were to walk into a room, you'd be like, oh, that's Harrison Ford. He's the guy who plays all of these roles that I love. Yet it's the opposite, because what if Indiana Jones walked in to the room? You're kind of like smirking because there's no reason that you have to believe now that it's not actually Indiana Jones. Right?
Yeah.
That's what they were going with. Like, right. Indiana Jones was there talking to them.
Right. It's an impossible thing to actually happen, but here it was.
And so how can you not smirk? I would, even though it would be preposterous, I would still be like, oh my God, I can't believe Indiana Jones is standing right there. Can we take a picture? I can understand what they're going through. Right. I understand why they're smirking.
Right. Because you remember when that happened to you.
Absolutely.
So one of the things that before we get down to the planet, Kirk had a green military shirt on, the green formal regalia, or whatever it's called.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that everybody knows this, but just for those two people who are listening who are not aware, the lighting on the show and the fabric that was used for the uniform tops made them come across as yellow. But they were green actually on set, and every other time they had a different fabric, it came across as green. And so that's why Captain Kirk's formal uniform was green, but then when he went back to his regular daily garb, it was yellow.
So do we need to talk about Scotty's outfit, his formal dress, or should we just let it go? Because I don't want to be disrespectful.
They're the Scots. Have you ever heard of a derogatory term for a Scotsman? The answer is no, because there isn't one. So.
Yeah, because nobody fucks with the Scotsman.
Exactly. So you can trash as much as you want. They either won't care or you'll be dead.
So what I want to know is
going into it.
Was Scotty actually not wearing underwear, space underwear, under his kilt?
It was Spaceballs.
Oh my God! That's the new title of the podcast.
It's totally original. Can't imagine us getting in trouble for that.
No, but it has a whole new meaning. You've just created a new meaning for Spaceballs. Up until this moment, Spaceballs has meant one thing.
Has it? I've always assumed that it was balls in space.
Scotty's balls?
Oh. I guess not Scotty's balls. Fair point. Okay. I wasn't referring to anyone specifically. Now we are. Got it.
I gotta go back for a second. It would have been great because they make such a big deal when Abe first shows up on the screen, and they in the cold open, and they make this huge moment with the music, and everybody's just looking in awe at the screen, and it would have been great if none of them recognized who it was. Who are you, sir, and why are you dressed so strangely?
I kind of expected that from Spock based on his expression. Everybody else looked awestruck and dumbfounded at the fact that Abraham Lincoln was sitting in a chair in space. I still love that that's how he approached. Anyway, one of the things that I thought was kind of funny, how Abraham Lincoln was fascinated by their ship, and it didn't faze him that the doors just magically open as he walked closer.
Yeah, I mean, in reality, he would probably have passed out if he truly, right? Like there would be such a culture shock that he wouldn't be able to say anything. He'd be afraid. He'd be cowering in the corner. It's so different. Or he would just started like beating at everybody up. By the way, Abraham Lincoln is like 6'6", isn't he? Something like 6'4".
Yeah, he's a tall dude. Yeah. Logistically, where was Lincoln? Like outside of where's the camera and where's the microphone?
Oh, you mean when he's on screen?
Yeah.
Well, that doesn't, like, that whole thing does not make sense, because from the beginning of the episode until they make it down to the planet, you get the sense that Lincoln is running the show, because he seems to know everything, and he's like, I'm sure you have many questions, which I have many answers for. And, like at a certain point, you're like, okay, so he holds all the answers. We have to do what he says to get the answers. And then by the time they get down to the planet, he has none of the answers, has no idea what the fuck is going on. So they kind of do a switcheroo on us, and it's fine. I was totally fine with it, because I think what happened was, they probably could have asked Lincoln, and he would have said, just in the same way that he knew a Vulcan was waiting on the planet, right? The just right amount of information was implanted into Lincoln's head so he could come and deliver the message and get them down on the planet, and then his job was done.
Right. His goal was to get them down to the planet, yeah.
And that was it. But it sort of didn't make sense. But it was so well written that you don't question it.
Right.
You just kind of go along for the ride because you want to know what's going to happen next.
Yeah. And I liked that it was a little bit like that previous episode, the empath, where we were given just a little bit more information each time. Like that moment you were just saying, how he knew that there was a Vulcan down on the planet, and how he knew Surak had the philosophy of gnome, which means all, and then he pauses and he's like, how did I know that?
Actually, there's a moment before we get down to the planet and stay there. There's a moment that another great Spock moment where I think this is the reason why people like Spock so much, where they're in their conference room. And Scotty says, the guy's been dead. He died, a couple of centuries ago on the planet that way. And then Spock corrects him. He's like, actually, it's more that way, which it's so great, right? Didn't need that bit of information, but that's what makes Spock, right?
Yes.
It's the same reason why I think everybody loves Data.
Yeah, Data has a little bit more innocence about him, because Spock is definitely like, hey, I just want to remind you, I'm better than you.
Yeah. He's not supposed to, though, right?
Right.
Does Spock, I know Vulcans think they're better than humans, but does Spock think he's better than humans?
Well, yeah, if he didn't think he was better than humans, he wouldn't have suppressed his human side.
Yeah, but is that peer pressure? That's peer pressure.
I guess, but, kind of the same thing. If you're surrounded by people who are pressuring you to do one thing, and then suddenly you're around that thing that they were pressuring you to not do, you would take full advantage of it. I don't think they traumatized him to the point of not using his emotions.
I suppose that's true. He does apologize for having the emotional outburst
yes.
when he sees Surak, which is...
Yes. Well, and that Surak is like, given the circumstances, it was acceptable. I forgive you. Let's move on.
Yeah, he does the creepy, overbearing religious dad move on that. Yeah.
So one of the things that I wanted to ask you about, because it happened again, alien adjective to a regular animal.
Oh, did I miss something? I missed it.
Well, Scotty said an Arcturian dogbird, and I was
those
like,
are two words I've never heard of.
Well, right. So that's the thing. He makes a reference to an alien planet and an alien creature. And I looked up, and we've got bird dogs, but we don't have dog birds. So obviously those are two animals that when put together you would go, what is that thing? Like I really want to see that, but it's clearly an alien combo.
No, it's after, when you're dog hunting, you have a pet bird that goes and retrieves the dead dog carcass.
Clearly.
Yeah. That's what that is. I didn't know that you didn't know that.
I didn't. It's been a long time since I've been dog hunting.
It's very easy to do these days. A lot of dogs roaming around, although much harder to find a dog bird.
Yeah, I would imagine. I mean,
they have to be pterodactyl size.
Well, with global warming and everything, yeah, they're on the edge of extinction. You're not really allowed to have them as household animals anymore.
Especially with their 36-foot wingspan.
They just destroy every room they're in. It's just obnoxious.
So I saw a meme, and it's not a meme. It's like it was a picture with words on it, which I guess is a meme. Anyway, it just showed a pterodactyl carrying a car off into the sunset, and the caption was "fucking pterodactyls."
I know. Seriously.
Yeah, I know.
So in a situation like that where he says Arcturian dogbird, do you roll your eyes and go, oh, there's another one? Or because we actually don't have dogbirds, would you take that as it's just like the rock crystals that are prone to attack?
Well, the fact that I've never heard of a dogbird, although that might be a Scottish thing.
It's not.
Where they have, it's not? Oh,
no.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, maybe they're having a little bit of fun with that. Like maybe there is some sort of Arcturian dogbird that just happens to have two English words smacked together that doesn't make any sense. I don't know. I mean, we have to have more examples of this.
Okay, that's fair.
Right?
I was just wondering, since it was not an actual Earthling thing, but it was an alien adjective, giving it a home planet, and then naming an animal or an object of whatever, does it fall under that category? Or because it is actually an alien animal too, does that count as just world building?
Or it actually might be for Scotty, a modern animal, much like we breed dogs and whatnot. Someone had found a way to breed dogs and birds.
Fair enough. Terrifying.
Making a dog bird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is a valid counterpoint. So when they get down to the planet, Kirk realizes, because Spock told him, that he doesn't have his stuff, and he checks his pockets, as you are wont to do. But he then pulls out his communicator and he flips it. And I don't know if you noticed, but I don't know if they were pressed for time or he didn't think about the fact that they don't usually respond immediately, but he gave them no time to respond. He goes, Kirk to Enterprise. Enterprise, can you hear me? Hello, this is Kirk. Do you read?
This is just a one-way communication, Kirk. You got to take your finger off the button.
Say over.
Yeah. Although I do like later in the episode that Scotty keeps Kirk on hold while he's dealing with business. Like he's taking advantage of his power.
Well, I also like that because he was an engineer, and so at the end, the engineering room is his passion. It's where his focus is, and without it, the ship won't fly. So he was like, "Yeah, I get that the captain has a problem. If this fixes more problems than whatever he's complaining about."
It would have been great if he got up, walked over to Uhura, hit the mute button, and then walked back and sat down and kept going about his business.
Right. Sarek, Spock's dad, was on the original.
I'm having
series.
trouble keeping up. Okay.
Oh, I know. There's this like Sarek. This is like Jim and Jem all over again. But having said that, the guy who abhors violence, when they have that first row with everybody, did you see him? Like,
yeah, everybody else is kind of rolling around on the ground.
Right.
And I mean, he was like a big dude, too.
And,
like, that guy was
and he was throwing down. Oh, the punches were flying with him. And then he comes back and he's like, I abhor violence. I'm like, why? You're so good at it.
Well, that's the same thing as like Mr. Miyagi whooping ass and then saying, Miyagi hate to fight. Like, really? Because you seem like you've been doing a lot of practicing at the thing you hate to do, right?
Yeah. And so one of the other things I thought was really cool was Kalis was in this. And I don't know if I tried to find it and I couldn't find out if this was his first appearance, or if he had been mentioned or shown up in the original series episodes. But this is definitely the first time that Kalis has. Well, this is the Kalis that Worf is constantly referring to. So
when they all showed up, when the enemies showed up, it was Genghis Khan, some lady who was an alien, and Kalis. And it was also like a future villainous bad guy, warmonger kind of guy.
Yeah, from Earth, who I think he started the eugenics war, but I'm not sure.
And so they're all standing there, and just the way that they're dressed, it just it felt like I was at Disneyland, and It's a Small World ride.
Well, but I think that's just because of Genghis Khan.
Well, the way that he was dressed. It was like borderline racist, right? I mean, maybe that's what they looked like, but it just felt like, okay, this is not what people look like. Right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
This is what Disneyland says that they look like.
Right. But again...
And neither Genghis Khan nor the woman have a line. They never talk.
Oh, yeah. I was going to say Genghis Khan does the imitations, but no, it's Kalis. You're right.
I guess maybe that was a budgetary thing.
Right.
But they don't have a line. I guess they don't need a line. Doesn't matter. Maybe they don't speak English. Well, I know they don't speak... I know that Genghis Khan does not speak English.
Right. But...
Still...
I mean, neither does Kalis, and here he was shouting out in a way more high-pitched voice than I expected.
Well, just like Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln's voice was very high, apparently.
Yes, in real life, yeah. In this episode, it was much deeper than it should have been. It's also from Kirk's memory, so it could also be that he pictured Abraham Lincoln having a much more deeper, heroic voice than he actually had.
That's a good point. Yeah, so let's talk about that for a second. So these beings were real. They were real people. Granted, they were not real in the sense that they were the people who they were looked like, but they were actual living beings who were not illusions. They were just people,
right,
in costumes, but they were real. And so I liked that part of it. Like that to me was a big science fiction part for me.
Oh, for sure.
It wasn't people in costume. I mean, they were in costume, but it wasn't a deception. They were who they were, and they thought they were who they were.
Right.
At least according to the data that the alien had. And that was very interesting to me. Like, I wish they had time. I always wish they had more time to explore this stuff, you know? But they had to do all the action stuff.
Right. Well, yeah. And I always wish the same thing. Like, it's so cool when they present these thought experiments. Yeah, these concepts. I always appreciate when they bring up these concepts, but it's not the main plot. So it's not something that the writers need to focus on or spend any time with, which is disappointing, especially in episodes like this where the concept is fascinating and would be fascinating to explore. And they kind of touched on it a little bit with Colonel Green, where he says, "I want to go home," and Kirk's like, "Where is that?" And he thinks about it for a second, and he goes, "I don't remember," because Kirk doesn't have that knowledge.
It's actually very similar to the interface. The next gen that we watched, where the mom, the supposed mom, only has information that Geordi has, and so they can therefore only report information that Geordi has.
Well, my new headcanon is that yes, they are related. It's the same planet. And
oh, interesting. Okay, so I also have a theory about that. So when the rock alien shows up and he kind of turns into this blinking alien, smoking, blinking alien, I don't know why he has lights. But he has lights. I guess they needed a way to signify that he was talking. So,
well, and I just assumed lights. it was heated up magma inside his head.
It glows according to when he's talking. Yeah,
right.
So that being actually looks like an alien on a next gen episode, and I don't remember when or which episode it is, but it's the one where Data has to go down and remove people from a settlement because the Federation has a treaty with this alien species. That has expired, and this alien species is very unsympathetic to life, and they just want their planet. So they're just going to go remove all the life, no matter what happens.
Interesting.
And I'm sure you remember this, but anyway, they talk to the alien, and it's sort of in outline, and it's this amorphous kind of blob talking.
Okay.
And it looks exactly like this rock alien. I wonder if there was inspiration taken from this original series episode, or if it's just an accident. Because I always thought this is such a cool idea because not all aliens are going to look like humans.
Right.
Right? So this was an expression of that. Okay, so going back to the character that they're actually real. So the way that we know they're real is there's a moment where we cut away from Kirk and Spock and their team, and we see the one guy plotting, and Kalis and that group plotting against them. And so the idea that we're seeing them operate independently from the rock monster means that they're real, right? It's not an illusion.
Sure.
These are real people. Yeah.
Right. No, that's
because
a
if
fair
they
point,
weren't, if they weren't real, they would just sort of disappear when they couldn't see them, right? And
or
so
they wouldn't be plotting.
appear,
they would just be waiting for them to make their decisions and
instructions,
react.
Right?
Yeah.
When they were fighting at the very beginning, I so wanted them to cut back to the rock alien eating popcorn. Because he's just kind of watching, you know?
Right. Well, and he said we're with countless others watching to see the result.
Right.
And so this episode was actually rewritten almost completely. The idea originally being that it was going to be an allegory for everybody tuning into TV and watching things that are getting more and more elevated just for their own entertainment.
Elevated meaning the plot line getting more elevated, or the stakes elevating?
Yeah, the stakes getting more and more elevated. Instead of having people fighting with swords, they start shooting with guns. And instead of having two people shooting with guns, we now have two wars. And just that kind of thing.
So there's a moment where they first talk to the rock alien, and the rock alien says something along the lines of, anything you can imagine to fight with, you have at your disposal. Like, it's unlimited. You can do whatever you want. But all they do is they make spears out of bamboo, right? So they must have meant any strategy that you can come up with is available to you, not you can conjure a nuclear weapon and you have it and try and win that way.
Well, actually, I mean, this is speculation on our part, so it could be either way. It could also be the rock monsters know how to make anything out of matter because that's their species, and they just assume that humans can. So, they're kind of watching, and they're like, well, why don't they just make an atomic bomb? Like, the fight's over, they win.
Yeah, I was expecting a little bit more cleverness from Spock and maybe Abe Lincoln. I mean, there's a point where Abe Lincoln, he says, in order for this to work, we must match the utter brutality of our enemies. And that utter brutality amounts to them throwing rocks and sticks at each other.
Right.
I was expecting like them stabbing people and chopping heads off and like everybody screaming in agony. But no, they're just lobbing rocks and bamboo shoots at each other.
Well, and I thought it was interesting too that we were trying to see how good would fare, and good just did the exact same thing that the bad did. They didn't try to take a higher road. They didn't they didn't try to just negotiate peacefully or anything. It was just we need to subdue them so they won't fight us anymore.
Yeah, they're pretty. That's the one thing I don't like about this episode is it's kind of unclever when it comes to the warfare. I was expecting some really cool strategizing by Spock, like I said, and Abe and the other guys too.
Right, and it was just such a disappointing ending to such a solid episode.
Yeah.
The actual resolution, because I feel like the last little bit where Kirk says, what did you offer them? And he says power, and he says, and what did you offer me? And he said the lives of the ship. And Kirk, I felt like Kirk was trying to explain there's the difference between good and evil, and it didn't seem like the alien really understood. He just said, I perceive, and that was kind of the end of it.
Right. Yeah.
And so it was a little disappointing that there wasn't more on that position of morality. That's where the difference is between good and evil. Evil always craves more because you can always have more power, and good wants the safety of everyone.
Well, the ending, speaking to the ending, I felt like this was another example of Star Trek trying to illustrate that just because an alien species doesn't follow our instincts or our morality doesn't make it wrong, because there's a point where Kirk says to the alien, why did you do this? For what reason? What do you gain? Or what right do you have to do this to us? And the guy says the same right that you have to come here is our right to explore and to
learn and to know, yeah.
And to learn. And their methods were not moral, obviously.
Right.
But that doesn't make them wrong because they don't align with our morality. And so that seems to be the themes that happen in the original episode, in the original series, as far as I can tell in these 3 episodes that we've watched. Right? It is normal for this rock species to torture people for the sake of exploration and learning, because they don't see anything wrong with it.
Right. Well, and it could also be kind of similar to the changelings, where they take a form, but if they're on a lava planet, it could be that they just live within the lava as a single mind. And so if they killed 1 or 2 of them, it doesn't really impact them. It's like killing a couple worker ants or something. It doesn't really impact those individuals because they're part of a greater unit. Well, it's expendable
for the sake of learning. Expendability.
Right.
That's their value system. I mean, we don't know their value system. And I guess that's kind of explored in all of the I think every show kind of has that character or that alien species where they don't understand why you care so much that we killed one of your people. Like, what's the big deal here?
Right. Yeah. Because we're actually one of the few. The majority of creatures on this planet, in everything, including insects and everything, don't care about the individual. It's definitely the need of the many outweigh the need of the few, and because the few are so expendable. Right. Exactly what you just said.
Yeah. And so I don't know. I mean, because there wasn't a B plot in this either. Just to go there, and again, right. I will posit that yes, there is a B plot. The B plot is the subtext, and the subtext in this one being just because we look different doesn't mean that I'm wrong. I guess. What I'm trying to say is that Star Trek, the original series, kind of has this. Well, it has this didactic B plot element of subtext, where we're trying to kind of lecture you with the fancy lights of science fiction, but trying to give you a tale of morality.
Right. The original series you're saying was a little bit more like parables, where just because you're watching one story, when it ends, you realize that it was actually sending you a different message.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of what South Park makes fun of. You know, South Park always parodied the message at the end of the episode, which they always illustrate with the character talking to the camera. That's kind of what that's the thing. Not that the meat of the story isn't interesting or unimportant, that there is an underlying moral subtext in all the episodes.
Well, yeah, and that's what Roddenberry. We talked about that in one of the first couple episodes. Like, that was Roddenberry's original intention, was to have this be his conduit on a way to speak to the world about morality and values.
Right.
You know, but so based on our criteria, and now having watched, you know, several episodes of the original series, including the third season, which means they've kind of got their footing by now, there are no B plots. And if there are no B plots, that means the entire series doesn't qualify as being Star Trek episodes.
Well, that's only if you reject my theory in that the subtext is the B plot. That because it is always hyper present, especially at the end of the episode. That is there a way that we can? Because I frankly think that this is a Star Trek episode.
Right. Well, yeah, and I think that there is an easy way to do it, which is there's not necessarily an A plot and a B plot, because then the original series is out completely. But that by the end of the episode, there are two endings. There's a moral resolution and there is the conflict resolution. Or not even a moral resolution.
Usually the same thing, though. Usually the same thing.
Not necessarily.
In this show.
No, because the conflict resolution here was that they managed to get their ship back. They managed to resolve the dispute with the aliens, and be released and get back to their ship. Same thing with the empath. You know, they were able to explain that they were just logic and no emotion, and that's you know, and so they were able to resolve with the aliens and get back to their ships. But there was the moral message as well, which was, you know, in this one, either the power in the evil and the lives in the good, or that morality is subjective and there is no actual absolute right or wrong.
I mean, I feel like we would have to amend it just for this series, because
I don't think so, because same thing with the interface episode, you know, which we said was a Star Trek episode. I guess we would have to say moral/personal message, because, you know, usually having seen these episodes and now thinking about how the rest of the series have A plots and B plots, it really is that the networks reminded the writers that the audiences are stupid. The original series was able to convey those messages in one single plot. They didn't have to split it between two plots. And in the continuing series, they were like, no, the audience needs to clearly see that there's one plot about the conflict and one plot about the morality/personal.
Although, I mean, in Next Gen, the B plot is executed over the course of the episode, whereas in the original series, it seems as though the morality is only arrived at by the end of the episode.
Right, but it's been delivered through the episode.
But it's not like a plot line. I mean, to me, I think that there actually was an actual B plot line in this episode, and that's what's going on the ship while they're on the surface.
Oh, I would agree with that.
There's just enough. Like there's a lot of Scotty is on, like, he's in command, and he puts the captain on hold so he can get the ship back in order. I mean, it sort of doesn't go anywhere, but there's enough of it where you could say, oh, there's other stuff happening.
Well, yeah.
Granted, it doesn't follow our criteria for what a B plot is, but other stuff is happening away from the actual A conflict.
Right. I think it does need to be amended a little bit. We can kind of figure out the wording as we go, but it doesn't necessarily have to have an A plot and a B plot, but there are two separate storylines about a conflict resolution and something on the more spiritual, personal, moral side, where there is a discovery or a growth development, something along those lines.
Yeah.
No?
That might be too vague. Well, I don't want to make it so vague that anything applies.
Right. No. And I agree with you on that. But I'm just saying, I mean, do you want to sit here and talk for half an hour and try to figure it out?
No, we're far past that point.
Right. The last thing I actually wrote down the last line. There's still so much of their work to be done in the galaxy, Mr. Spock. And because this was the anti-penultimate episode of the series, and I think they knew at this point, it was the commentary by Roddenberry about both the series, like they still had way more stories to tell, and about the world of we still have so much work to do on getting to the point where we're past this petty conflict, like as what happened on the planet.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. He was speaking directly to Spock and to the audience.
Right. Yeah. That glare at the camera really made it obvious.
I do feel like Jim is pretty chipper when he comes onto the bridge in that last scene.
Oh, yeah. Mr. Sulu, take us to our next assignment.
Yeah. Yep. He seems very happy that all these people just died. I mean, they are conjured people, but they're real people. They're actually people who died. I mean, for all intents and purposes, Lincoln died on the planet in a pretty brutal, terrible way. Right?
Well, yeah, and Kirk even said so. I just saw him die in front of me. Or die all over again or something.
But they're looking at it like they were, like the animatronics that we just saw were so lifelike that I felt like it was really him. It was fucking him.
Right.
Like, that was a real person. Like, you watched somebody get shot in the face. Or you actually went and killed somebody. Like, they're making it like this was sort of like they were on a holodeck the whole time, right? That's the way this scene plays.
Right.
It should have been somber.
Yeah.
It should have been arriving at these things in a somber way, not like, well, I'm glad we're still alive. Let's get the fuck out of here.
Right. Yeah. Well, and not just the people that were dead on the planet, but their realization of how many times have they done this before, and they're going to continue doing it because that's how they perceive the way to learn and to know and to grow.
Right. I mean, really, they should have pushed that planet into the sun.
Right.
Right. I mean,
yeah.
Or put up a buoy warning people, like a space buoy.
Right.
If you see fucking Abraham Lincoln start talking to you, warp 10, out of there.
So one final note about the Savage Curtain before we wrap up is this is actually considered one of the worst episodes of Star Trek, and I really think it's just because it has Abraham Lincoln, and if you see Abraham Lincoln in Star Trek, you're like, that's got to be a ridiculous episode.
I totally agree. I mean, you must be talking to just blurb writers for Netflix who say this. Because really, if you watch the episode, it's not. I think I said this before. It's not just a best hits of Abraham Lincoln.
Right.
It's right. He kind of has function, and I like the way that the reason why it is Abraham Lincoln, which isn't it. And what I also like about it is it's not like they started the episode with Kirk reading an Abraham Lincoln book. You know what I mean? They didn't beat us over the head with it. They just kind of mention it. It's like, oh, he used to be a hero, or he is a hero of yours, and that's probably who we're seeing right now is Abraham Lincoln.
Right. Well, yeah, and then it kind of alludes to that's why Sarek is down on the planet as well. I did like there was one little throwaway thing about Abraham Lincoln saying like it'll be a good chance to try my wrestling again or something like that. And nobody like what you were just saying, nobody acknowledges, oh, that's right, you used to wrestle when you were younger.
Yeah, they didn't start the episode either with Kirk practicing wrestling and then referring to the move that he just did as the Abraham Lincoln.
Yes.
Considering how campy the show can be, this is actually, I mean, we talked about the fact the ending really just, it doesn't stick the landing. Yeah. Exactly. But the episode works. I think it works better than some of the previous episodes that we've watched.
The thing that I want to say about sticking the landing, it's not that the end of the episode was bad. It was that the fight was so brief and it was just fisticuffs, and that was how they tried to resolve it. And they also fought off screen, killing everybody.
Well, I'm assuming that this planet's surface is just always riddled with battles, right? They're like not with humans, but just with any race that happens to pop by this planet.
Yeah, for knowledge.
I would think that obviously this species, whatever they are, if you really want to get into the weeds of it, they're approaching like Q status where they can conjure matter and make life forms and read minds. I mean, like they're like a proto Q in a way.
And they can create an environment just by thinking about it. Yeah, by willing it.
So should we figure out what we're going to be watching next?
Yeah, let's do it.
Oh, excellent.
Next Generation?
The Next Generation.
Nice.
Season 2, Episode 19. Manhunt. Original air date, June 19th, 1989. Troy is more than just a little embarrassed when her mother, Luoxana...
Yay!
Oh, look at that. Yeah, how about that? As outrageous as ever, arrives on board the Enterprise. And judging by the thumbnail, not at all what it's about. Anyway.
Oh, I wonder if the Next Generation guy did the same thing.
It's possible. Because it doesn't look at all like this is what it's about.
Right. I mean,
nor is Luoxana ever an A-plot, ever, in this show. Ever.
Is that true? I don't know. All right, cool. Well, let's go watch it.
Indeed.